Great. Again, welcome to our webinar on intentional leadership, building a reflective practice. We decided on this topic because so many of the instructional leaders that we engage with in buildings let us know that they weren't provided with a lot of training. A lot of it is on the job, and many leaders are actually teachers who have come up through the ranks. And so again, we want to make sure that everybody has the tools and the time to be able to do this work, because it is such important and complex work. So today, I hope that you walk away with the power of why. So why is this role so important? And why are you engaging in this role? We're going to look at intentional leadership and what that means. We're going to look at how we build a reflective practice, and then planning for next steps. So as I stated, anybody who just joined us, I'm going to invite you to grab a notebook or some kind of paper that you can jot things down, and grab a pen, because I am going to ask you to start building this reflective practice today. Okay, take a moment to reflect on this quote. And if anybody wouldn't mind unmuting or adding to chat, what resonates with you about this quote in regards to being a school leader? Anybody at all? Feel free to just, what jumps out at you? Okay. So I had a few people add to chat. So commitment without needing to be perfect. So there's that nice balance. Being present. I think that's a nice one that Catherine shared. Ms. Taylor, aligning values to actions. Okay. So I loved this quote when I saw it, because I think that when we take on the role of being a leader, we often feel like I was chosen for this, or I have this job because I know everything and I can do everything right. And we kind of carry that weight on our shoulders. And I'm here to tell you, you don't have to do that, right? We don't have to know everything. We don't have to be perfect all the time. But what we do need to do is be committed to showing up to do the work. So pushing up our sleeves, working alongside of our team in the buildings, that is going to bring you to leadership much quicker than trying to be on a pedestal and be perfect and be, the keeper of knowledge. That's something we want to let go of pretty quickly. Jennifer shared being engaged with those that we work with. Absolutely. So when we talk, we're going to not talk too much about the nuts and bolts of leadership today. We're going to talk more about the approach and the philosophy. But one of the nuts and bolts that I will add here is, if you're going to be showing up to do the work, that means people see you in the building, right? So one of the first things that you can think about after today is, once I have my why and kind of the philosophy of what it is that I do, how do I make that seen? And so starting with you and making yourself seen in the building is key. Okay, let's use this to move us into the power of why. So not only do leaders, school leaders in particular, kind of wear this badge of being the person that knows it all, we're also the person that is the go-to with the many, many challenges that we face, right? So school leaders are faced with parent issues and student issues and staff issues. And so those constant challenges can be extremely overwhelming. And so it's really important that we start with why to ground us when we face those challenges. So the first thing that we're going to consider today is, what are our values? And someone mentioned that before, our actions aligned with our values. So we're going to start with these two questions. And if you have a notebook or a piece of paper, I want you to jot these down. When we're thinking about our values, we think about, this is who I am at my best. And this is what I rely on to make decisions. Okay. So once you have those written down, here's the way. It's a nice process for identifying the values most important to your work. So this handy dandy little activity is something you can also do with your team. And we ask you to jot down the first 7 things that come to mind. Now, we're not going to do that today. We're going to do one for today, but I want to share this with you. The way you do this activity is you jot down those 7 things. You take some time to do this. What are those things that are really important to you? And then after you have those 7 things completed, you're going to hang this up where you're going to see it every day. So if you are in your school building this summer, you're going to hang it in your office. If you're working from home, you're going to hang it where you work or, where you hang out the most. Okay. You're going to give it a week. And after that week, I want you to cross out 2. It doesn't mean they're not important. It just means that we want to be really focused with this. Okay. So by the end of that week, you'll be down to 5. Okay. Then I want you to keep that hanging for another week and repeat the process. So by the end of the second week, you're going to cross out 2 more. So you will be down to 3. Okay. I like leaving this 7 with the crossouts as the guiding document. And the reason why is this could change, right? You might revisit this in a month, in 3 months to say, you know what, some things have shifted and some things have caused me to reflect. And now I'm going to readjust my values. That's okay. Okay. But you should ultimately have 3 things that are your guiding compass that drive your work on a daily basis. Okay. Now for today, I'm going to ask you to jot down 1 thing because we're going to do the follow-up activity to this. So take a moment and jot down 1 value that describes this is who you are at your best. And this is what I rely on when I make decisions. Okay. I'm going to ask for a thumbs up when you have something written down on your paper. Okay, I see a couple thumbs up, a couple more. And this is not easy work. So, and I'm not trying to rush the process today, but in order to model it for you today, I'd like you to have 1 thing that you think is important in terms of answering these questions. Does anyone need more time? Okay. Okay, so our next step in this process, and imagine you're doing this when you have your 3 values completed, is to make sure that our behaviors align with our values. Okay, so once you identify those core values, you're going to want to spend time thinking about the behaviors that support them. So here are the 2 questions I want you to consider. And we're going to consider it today for the 1 value you wrote down. Jot down a time when you were fully living into the values. What feeling comes to mind? So not what somebody else told you or any accolades you received, but how you felt. Okay. And then on the flip side, when you were living outside of that, how does that feel when that happens? So I'm going to give you a couple of moments to think that through and jot those things down. If anyone is done, I know I'm giving you we're shortening the time process here. Just give me a thumbs up when you have some things down. Okay, I saw a couple of thumbs up. Thumbs. Cool. Great. Okay, and you may not have both. You might have the first one and not the second, or vice versa. I'm going to ask you to unmute, not to share the specific example, but to share with me was this difficult, or was this easy for you? Anybody at all, feel free to unmute and share. I always like to give a little bit of time as you process and consider. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share what I'm thinking about, and then anybody please feel free to join in. For me, it's actually easier to answer the second one, to answer times that I felt like I was living outside of my values and how that made me feel. And I see, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. It just has like some initials, but I see you're shaking your head. Yes. And anybody want to share, you know, even if you don't want to share the actual experience, but the feeling, feel free to unmute and share.
Sure, I'll share. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So the second one was quite easy to come up with, because I find that when I'm not really within my core values or feeling like balanced, I tend to be more anxious. I'm moving really fast, but I'm really not being productive. And so when I'm able to like sit and process and really think things through, I feel like I'm more effective in, getting things done or whatever the scenario may be.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's a really good example, like anxiety, just that feeling of, the way I think of it sometimes is like, just something's not right. Like something's not sitting with me. Like your point, I'm not feeling productive. I'm not feeling like myself. Okay. And Miss Taylor said she agreed with Miss Lewis. It's also more draining. I'm really glad you brought that up, because we know that being a leader, you have so many time pressures and so many different things that you need to give your attention to. So we definitely don't need something that's going to drain our energy and make us feel like, again, anxious, less productive, any of those things. Anyone else have something for the answer to the second question? Okay. How about the first one? Does anyone have an example of a time where you were fully living into whatever that one value was that you jotted down? And how did you feel?
So I'll share the value. Well, when I was fully living within that value, I felt successful, accomplished, because that's who I truly am. And so, of course, I guess my inner drive allowed me to pursue that. And I realized that, that's who I am. This is who I am. This is what I am about. So it was easy for me to actually fully live within that value, but to sit here and think of it, it was a little harder for me to think of it, to write it down.
Okay.
Actually being in the moment and being present, that part was easy, because that's who I am. I didn't have to fake it to make it. It was who I was.
I like that.
It's part of my goal.
I love that you shared that. You didn't have to fake it to make it, because oftentimes when we do that, we're doing that for a reason, but it does feel inauthentic.
Right.
So to your point, I love that you just said it was easy to do, right? It's easier to operate within that value. Someone else shared, Kathleen shared a sense of peace and joy. I think it's like the antithesis of what we said before, right? So instead of anxiety, you're feeling that sense of peace. And I love that. I think the other thing I've heard from people is you also are not looking for outsiders to give you recognition or accolades, right? That's unnecessary, because you're feeling that competence and confidence from within. So an important thing to kind of guide us. Now, does that mean that we can always, are we going to come up against someone who does not have the same values, or a system that doesn't prioritize our values? Yes, we're definitely going to come against that. And so that's why it's so important to know what they are, so you can understand how to navigate that. That's why I like using this compass as kind of a symbol for this, because it doesn't mean it's going to happen easily, but it does mean it's the guiding factor that we can then use to figure out, how am I going to navigate this situation? Thanks so much for sharing, ladies. Okay, so now that we kind of have that idea of values-driven behavior, is we want to think about intentional leadership. So what does that mean? Again, in the daily operations that you're engaging in, and so much of it is operational, right, as opposed to being an instructional leader, we really want to think about how can we make it intentional. And so we start, I love this image because, and I actually searched for quite a while, give me an image that shows someone grounded with a sense when they're dealing with chaos. The chaos isn't gone, but we're just kind of separating ourselves from the chaos. And I think that's an important thing to consider. Your role is not to mitigate necessarily the various things that are going on. Some of those things are just going to happen regardless, but it's your being an intentional leader means you're grounded, right? So we want to make sure that all of your competing responsibilities and the uncertainty, right? How many of you were leaders during the COVID pandemic, or even post, you're all post-COVID leaders, but that uncertainty, that level of we don't know what's going to happen, can truly be such an overwhelming feeling. And the worst part of it isn't the overwhelm, it's the feeling of being ineffective, right? So a lot of us know how to deal with that overwhelming feeling, but it really can be disconcerting to feel ineffective. So we need to stay grounded. And the way to do that is to be intentional. And there's 4 steps to being intentional. Okay. Having a very clear purpose, having deliberate actions that align to that purpose, engaging in honest communication. That's the hard part. We're going to talk about that next. And then engaging in constant reflection. So that's why we call, and I had that title today, a reflective practice, because truly it does take practice. We need to do it so regularly that it becomes a habit. Okay, so these 4 steps are what you're going to really want to hone in on so that you can be an intentional leader. Okay, we're going to dive in a little deeper, especially to that honest communication piece. Okay, before we move forward, I want to put out this disclaimer. How many of you as leaders have a little bit of an issue with being a control freak? I'm raising my hand, right? Either by your nature or because you think that's what the role implies. Okay, but I want you to really consider that being intentional does not mean controlling everything. So take a minute to read this and see if this resonates at all. Okay. I think this is important as a school building leader, because if we have developed our practice such that we feel like we know the best ways to do it, often it can be our kind of de facto mode to have everybody do it the way we do it. It's really important that we recognize that different teachers, different staff members may go about things in different ways. They should always be in alignment with the goals and the visions of the school, any steps that you have provided that are important, and the milestones, those check-ins along the way. But we do have to allow people to go their own path. And as long as you've provided those 3 things, we'll be good. Okay. But it doesn't mean that you have to control how everyone does everything. Okay. And Jennifer shared delegating. Delegating can be hard, right? Obviously, we want to make sure that things are done well. But it's a process. And I think it's just an important one to acknowledge if we're going to be intentional leaders. Okay. All right, let's dive in a little bit to what the research says. There was, if you all heard of Brene Brown, she did a 7-year study with executives. So this is not specific to school leadership, although she has transferred this and written some additional work around schools. Totally transfers, okay? She asked business leaders, executives, this question: What, if anything, about the way that people are leading today needs to change in order for leaders to be successful? So imagine 7 years of this study, 150 executives, there was a common theme. We need more brave leaders and courageous cultures. What does that mean? Too many people are just going along to get along, if you've heard that phrase. Too many people are just doing what we've always done. Okay. And so that needs to change in order to see real growth and success. And the stakes are high, a lot higher, I think, in schools, because our success is our student success. Okay. So what was the number one barrier that they identified? They found the number one barrier to having a courageous culture was having tough conversations and giving honest feedback. Okay. So if we know that that is the biggest challenge for leaders across every industry, it's certainly going to be a challenge for us as school leaders. And so we need to face that head on. How many of you as leaders received training before becoming a principal or a coach or an assistant principal? How many of you received training on how to communicate and give difficult feedback? Was that something that was part of your training? I don't see anyone going like this. Yes, yes. From what I hear from most people, that is not part of your training. Oh, and Kathleen said you had to take crucial conversations. Well, Kathleen, that's what we read too, and that's what we use, is Crucial Conversations. I highly recommend it. It's in our resources at the end of this slide. Okay, so Jennifer had to read it as well. So that's awesome, because many people are not required to do that kind of training. They come up through the ranks. They're identified because they're a strong instructional leader, but they may not have had that experience of having training in that. So that's awesome. So Jennifer shared it was part of her coaching. For those of you who haven't, it is in the references at the end. So I will share that. But that's really critical training. And so like I said, I used Crucial Conversations, but we also use this from Brene Brown's work. And I love this quote. And I have to be honest, I never heard this before. It makes sense, but I never heard this before. Clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So it's really the connection between the skill and the feeling. So my ability to communicate in a clear way or an unclear way is going to basically impact how that person feels about me, how they feel about their circumstances, and how they feel about how they can change the situation. So what does this mean? Let's dive in a little more. Okay. Whoop. My keys did not want to work. Here we go. I want you to take a moment to read these 5 bullets. Does anyone have an example or just hey, yes, this has happened to me that they want to share? I think it happens pretty frequently. Okay. I think about in a school building, how difficult it is to do formal evaluations, yes, but informal evaluations or walkthroughs or learning walks or whatever you call them, that you want to give clear feedback that's actionable, but sometimes difficult, right? And so if we think about if any of these approaches have ever been used on us and we've felt unclear about the situation, if we felt angry, okay, we want to always consider these 3 things. So how did it make me feel? How did it impact the situation? How did it impact your relationship with this person? Okay. That got it in the middle of a conversation is so disrespectful. This is being shared. Arisleda, it makes me feel like I'm being rushed. Okay. Rushed, shut down, right? Not heard. Like, I don't have the time to hear you. I think that's probably the most common one these days. I see that a lot. And I can't say I haven't done it before because I probably have. But it can be easy in the moment instead of having the difficult conversation. Okay. Exactly, sad but common. So think about that. If that got it happened, you feel rushed, unheard, all of those things. How does it impact what you're dealing with in real time in the situation, right? It doesn't necessarily improve your ability to make change, right? If somebody gave me feedback as a teacher, as I am engaging with my students or engaging with another staff member, if I feel badly now, badly meaning not heard, it's not going to give me a line of sight to making change, right? So instead, we want to think about being very clear in our communications, actionable, specific. Okay. Let's talk more about that. So the references that I'm going to share with you at the end today, the Crucial Conversations and the Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead, both have information about communicating in a way that is clear, direct, and actionable. Our work today is not going to spend the rest of the time on that communication piece. What it's identifying for you is the need to do that work. Okay. We want to think about ourselves being not only strong communicators, but reflective in that work. So we're going to move on to this piece about being reflective in our decision-making and our communication. Okay. I'm going to share with you several different types of reflective practices as we want to build this into our practice. So this is a very formal reflective cycle, and it's specifically useful when you have to make decisions. So less about real-time interactions with people and more about I'm making a decision coming up, and I really want to go through this very thoughtful reflective cycle. Okay, so these 4 steps, I'm going to give you a moment to look at this graphic and read these questions that the leader would ask themselves. Okay, so it comes down to these 4 areas. So how aware am I of what's going on and my relationship to it? How intentional am I? And somebody mentioned this in the beginning, aligning practices and decisions to what our goals are. What is my ability to assess what's working, what's not working? How is this impacting people? And then how am I able to adjust? Okay, so I wanted to give this to you in a real-time example. Okay, so imagine you are an instructional leader in a building and your middle school classrooms, those students are performing at very different levels across classrooms. And this brings you concern. So what you've decided to do was implement common formative assessments. So now every middle school will use ELA, for example. Every middle school ELA teacher is going to use the same assessment for their units across the year. We're going to review these at PLC meetings, and then specific recommendations will be made to support the teachers whose students are struggling. Okay, so this was the decision you made. Let's walk through that reflective cycle, because once you make this decision, obviously there's some pretty serious repercussions, and we want to make sure that it is the best decision to make. So you're going to reflect by starting with that awareness. Am I sure that it is inconsistent instruction that's the problem? Are there other factors that I've not considered? So have I missed something about the way these students were placed, for example? Okay. The second question is that intentionality. So am I being intentional in how I have planned for this to happen? So their creation, the scheduling of the PLCs to best work with the teachers' schedules. Okay. I can think this is a great idea, but if I'm not intentional about how I think it through and action it, it's not going to be effective. Okay. That third step is considering the impact on everybody. So how will I know? How will I assess if my plans are effective and have a positive impact? I want to plan that out in advance. Am I going to be part of the PLCs? Am I going to ask for feedback? So what are the ways I'm going to assess if this is working? And then the last one, how am I going to adjust? So how will I respond to any issues that come up? What if we do this and there's absolutely no changes in performance after the second go round? Okay, so you can see how these 4 steps really help making big decisions in a school. We never want to just change something for the sake of change. If you think something's not working, so I need to try something different, we still want to be very intentional about the thinking around that new thing we're going to implement. Okay. And I'm going to suggest that this is more challenging when it's a change that you've not initiated. So for example, how many of you receive changes from above, right? It's a district initiative. You should still engage in this process, okay? Even if it's a district initiative, because the bottom line is, in order for it to be successful in your building, you need to think these things through. Okay. We're going to talk about 2 more. This is a much less formal, and I really love this for the real-time interactions you have on a daily basis. Okay. So it's called the 3 Ps: pause, pose, and partner. Okay. So you want to pause and take a minute. We talked about earlier just how busy you are, going from meeting to meeting, trying to jump into a classroom, people stopping you in the hallway. Okay. We often can get through a day or multiple days and not have stopped to think about what we are actually doing. So if we build this as a reflective practice, as a habit, that you can actually pause and just take a moment to think about, okay, what is it that I'm doing? What is it that just happened in that interaction? And pose a question or 2. Ask yourself a question or 2 about that situation. Okay. Why am I having this interaction in the hallway? Why is this person, when I go into their room, still not implementing? Right. So take a moment to think, pose a question. And then I think this is probably the most important: partner. Find a person or 2 that you can partner in the thinking. Right? This work is way too complex to do it alone. This does not mean you have a meeting, because all of us know we do not want to add another meeting to our list of things to do. But could you grab somebody for 5 or 10 minutes, ask them to stop in, ask them to have coffee with you, just to get their thinking around a particular topic? Because we want to be intentional on a regular basis, on a daily basis. We do not want to get to Friday and think, what happened this week? Okay. How many of you engage in this type of, or some type of reflective process on a daily basis? Anybody? Sometimes. And you know what? Some of you, Jennifer, you're sharing, some of you, you might write it down. I like to write things down, but even if you're not able to get back to your office to write it down, it's still important to engage in this. I'm going to just open up chat to see some thoughts. So Catherine says, not to this level. Ms. Taylor, not daily. Okay, but you have something that you're using, and that's really the important part. But I think just acknowledging that you're engaging in it is the important part. Okay, because the more you recognize that what you're doing truly is reflection, the more you're going to go ahead and do it. Okay, Jennifer, same. You have a partner. I think that's key. And, you know, you don't have to unmute if you don't want to, but have you found that to improve your overall feeling about your work?
Absolutely. I'm sorry, my son is here listening to his tablet. That's why I was muting.
That's okay. That's totally okay. But yes, so you've
Yes.
seen that to be like empowering in your experience.
Yeah. Well, and I'm an instructional coach, but I absolutely just to now he's going to sing. Yes.
Love it. Love it.
Just when I get stopped in the hallway and asked a question or something isn't, I do absolutely. I'm very much, well, I have a partner who was my coach, and I will say, hey, can we just, what time do you have available? Or when can we? And we then will set aside time that's not a meeting, but it's just an informal talk. And I'll say, this is what's going on. And we just discuss it. And then he may come back to me and say, let me run something by you. And it's, it's back and forth, So yes,
Right.
and it's built me. That's what's built me as a leader.
Right.
That's what's built me. Because
what I like,
him.
yeah, and what I like about you said is it feels low stakes. It feels like,
absolutely.
and that's, I think, going to be critical to this, is you're not feeling any of those things like that. You can kind of take the armor off and let your guard down and just have this person connect with you, be a thought partner. Right. I think I really, when I started hearing that language, thought partner, I really liked that, because you can revise your thinking 5 ways till Sunday, right? And you don't feel judged by it. And I think that's really important. Some more comments in chat. Monica, 321, 3 goals accomplished, 2 things I need to work on tomorrow. 1 thing that was awesome. I love that. I love the awesome. I think we need to do that more, because again, if you're showing up and doing the work alongside your people, that's pretty awesome. Ms. Taylor, I have a few thought partners. It varies, depends on the need. That's a good point, right? Some people you're going to go to talk about staff. Maybe somebody else I'm going to go talk to about parents, right? Different people for different things. And then Catherine shared, I partner with someone. What are the perfect balance? We have varying points of view. That's a good thing to raise, and challenge each other to think from different perspectives. I think that's really important, because a lot of what we do can feel very personal, and you don't want to personalize something. So if somebody else can have a different point of view, it can make you think about it differently. It's going to make you more effective. Okay. I'm going to share this one as our last piece before we wrap up. This is, I think, a fun way to do some reflecting. It's something that you can use for yourself. You can also use it with your team. It's called Start, Stop, Continue. I like to do it either at right before I start a new school year, at the end of a semester, at the end of a marking period. So you have your 3 areas, all the things you want to stop. And it's okay to stop doing something. It's okay to say, it's outlived its usefulness, this practice. Okay, the middle section. What is something that worked really well, kind of like your awesomes? Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's your bottom. This is your continue, your green button. So what's something that worked, went really well? What's something that went better than you thought it would, right? Or what's that awesome, that big success that you want to continue? And the middle section is start. What is something that you'd like to learn or get started this year? What have you heard about from a colleague that you're going to try? What's going to help you get organized? Okay. Obviously, these are just a few. You can certainly add more, but when we do this with staff, it's kind of like a kind of quick, fun way to reflect. And I'm not looking for you to write a book here. Can be bullets, can be just jot a few things down. So after today, you're going to get a copy of this that you can use on your own or with your team. Okay, and Ms. Taylor shared, very similar to, if I say this correctly, MOLOSA, more of, less of, same as. Okay, and Kathleen shared, my supervisor has me do this during my evaluation process, which is great. It's a very proactive way, and you're not having to tell them, hey, you should stop doing this. They are going to be self-identifying. Okay. Okay, so today when you leave, I hope that you have some things to take away that you're going to engage in for yourself. Just to wrap up, we identified a value. Maybe you jotted down some more. Hopefully you started thinking about some of the behaviors that attach or that relate to those values, how you can action those values. Also consider some communication strategies, some things that you can do to make sure you're having those honest conversations with clear feedback. Okay. And then some ideas for reflection. So as we wrap up today, I want you to think about what are your strengths? And you identified a lot of them today because you're already doing some of these things. Where might you need more support? So if you've never had training on how to have those crucial conversations, okay? And what do you need to prioritize for September? You know, summer is an opportunity to take a step back, to relax, to have some downtime, but it's also a great opportunity to do some of that thinking about what do I want to prioritize? We can't do it all. So what are those top few things that we want to engage in? I always want to share that we're here to support you. Please continue to show up for these webinars on a monthly basis. They're free for you. We also have loads of resources on our website, some very nice ones around leadership, around school culture. We also have 2 new programs for leaders. This is brand new. I'm super excited. They're hybrid programs. They include asynchronous and synchronous work. They're 6-week leadership programs. One is called Growing Leaders, and we're offering this starting September. And it is for people who are new leaders, are leaders but never had training, or are emerging. So you're in the ranks and you want to get some more skills under your belt. The second is called Leading Change, and that's for leaders. Could be you've been around forever, but there's a lot of change going on, and there's some really important research and strategies and skills that we'll be able to dive into deeply. So check them out on our website, or feel free to respond. I'm going to give everybody a survey link right now. Feel free to respond in the survey, and we'll send you some more information. So I'm going to add this link into the chat. And I really want to thank everybody. I especially appreciate you putting your thoughts into the chat, to unmuting and sharing. It makes our webinars that much more rich, I think. So again, if you wouldn't mind, please fill out this survey. And I'm going to just put on the screen for you some of the references from today that you may want to check out. So Crucial Conversations, and I'm going to pull up the author because it escapes me right this moment. Okay, by Grenny and Patterson. Okay, a great tool. I'll hop back over to this. And I mentioned Brene Brown, Dare to Lead. She also has some work around teaching in schools. And then obviously some of the other references. So again, I thank you so much for coming and hope to see you at another webinar soon. Have a great day, everybody. I'll stick around for questions if anyone has.
Thank you so much.
Oh, Sandra, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. It was just what she needed, which makes me feel really good. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Yolanda, Jessica, Miss Taylor, Miss Mitchell, Jennifer. Appreciate seeing everybody today. I wish I could have seen everybody on screen. I don't know why my Zoom does that now. It doesn't allow me to see everybody. Do you have that, Christina?
Sometimes it happens, and don't mind me, I have no voice. This is from baseball tournament weekend. Sometimes